Hey everyone, this is David. Welcome to episode 4, the proper episode 4. My apologies for not having an episode last week. I'm going to try my absolute best just to kind of get some of these episodes, some of these things rolling a little earlier in the week, which is why I'm recording really early in the week and also trying to kind of catch my breath before we start off with very eventful and jam-packed stuff, especially as we kind of roll into what is pretty much being dubbed by many as non-E3 week, but we already had kind of like a taste of that in the form of a really, really awesome and it's just a immaculate E3, and I'm sorry, a state of play that I really want to talk about. But before I get into that, I do kind of want to touch just a little bit of base as to why there was no episode last week, but I did post an update for those of you who catch the podcast through either Spotify, Anchor.fm, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. As far as just, what that little 5-minute update kind of entailed. So the circumstances that I was kind of mentioning a couple of times there in that video is that right now there are circumstances happening at home that don't necessarily allow me the proper time or the proper windows to be able to do content creation right now, whether it be the YouTube videos or the podcast itself here, things like that. So there's people coming in and out of the house and things like that, but I'm in the process of kind of formulating a solution right now. I'm actually in the process of doing a little bit of a mini project, and as such, this episode, to an extent, is going to serve as a form of an experiment, as a test run, as a guinea pig for that sort of implementation. And that thing that I'm doing, that little kind of, I don't want to say construction, but like the thing that I am intending to have done here is sound dampening, specifically acoustic paneling. So I know realistically it's not feasible for me to be able to soundproof a room. Like, it's just not it's not going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to be physically possible for me to be able to soundproof a room so that sound doesn't come in and sound doesn't come out. Like, it's just inevitable. Like, the thing that I can possibly do as best as possible is to try to limit as much as the noise, whether it be coming in or out, as possible, and dampening it. So I kind of already have a little bit of this room treated, in the sense that I have carpet on the floor, and then I have all these collector's editions boxes stacked up here on one side of the room. If you guys follow the YouTube channel, you pretty much have seen this stack of collector's editions in the form of like this little like pillar here in the middle of my backdrop. It's pretty much what I use as my backdrop for my YouTube videos. So that's essentially what makes up half of the room. The other half is kind of like just a bunch of boxes, storage boxes, or things that I usually keep things in, or where I'm kind of keeping around in case I want to box stuff back up, specifically like consoles, figures, things like that. Figures that are still technically on display. And then kind of surrounding and sandwiched in between all of this is also a bunch of media racks that are pretty much holding all of my video games: Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, even some of the old school stuff. So a lot of people online would say that you're actually already on the path to sound treat a room as best as possible, and I understand that. Like, I can definitely hear a little bit of the difference between a room such as this and pretty much any other room inside of this house. But I thought to myself, I gotta make it better, especially because of the circumstances right now with my brother moved back in, and of course, that's going to cause my parents, specifically my mom, to be more at home because, he's the youngest. So obviously she's going to be, and we're Hispanic. So he's got hierarchy, and my mom's going to be like, what do you need? What do you need? You want me to cook? You want me to, the usual shit. So because there's going to be things that are just outside of my control as far as noise, I can't go up to either of them and tell them like, oh, can you not do this? They're going to get frustrated with me. Goes in one ear and out the other. So what can I do on my end to try to polish this up and try to at least amplify not only the sound of the podcast, the sounds of the videos, but also the overall process of making this content, while at the same time, try to make it as rich as possible without any interruptions, without even like if people are coming in and out of the house, dampening that sound as much as possible. And I thought to myself, you know what? It's finally time to treat the room a little further. Something that I was going to actually save up on as far as time and money until me and the girlfriend moved in, because I thought to myself, okay, what's the point of putting up these panels, putting up these foam panels if I'm gonna be moving out pretty soon. But now that A, the brother moved in, and B, I don't have a job that lets me move out anytime soon, that it's completely unpredictable as to when that's actually going to happen. I figured, you know what? Let's pull the trigger on it. Let's finally do this. And so I started already getting a little bit of that. I ordered a 12 pack of sound paneling uh, squares. Basically, they're panels. They have like those like little zigzags. You've seen them. Just Google sound panels or go on Amazon, look them up, and you'll exactly what you see is pretty much what I got. I got them for about 16. Well, they cost $16. $16. It's not. It's pretty cheap. It's pretty. They're not gonna be the best thing, but they're better than nothing. So just to kind of start off and test things out, and also I don't want to go crazy because, like I said, this is still technically a room that I'm doing my content in, but at the same time, if in a purely perfect hypothetical world, if let's say next week one of the jobs that I applied for all of a sudden just hits me up and says, "Hey, you want to do an interview here in LA? And if things are looking good, can you start within a couple of weeks?" I'll be like, yeah. And sure, at that point it's like there's no point in going the extra mile of soundproofing or acoustic dampening or acoustic treating a room in its entirety, like putting up the wooden frames that have that kind of canvas pulled over it and nailing to the wall and doing all this extra shit. Like there's really no point in doing any of that stuff. So I thought to myself, okay, let me just do something that's a little bit on the cheap, affordable, and very convenient side, nothing that takes up too much time and too much craziness and also, of course, money. So I thought, okay, I saw these $16. And then I also noticed that I still have like a $40 Amazon gift card. So I told the system to use $16 out of the $40. So I pretty much got this first set for free. Like literally, like a prime shipping, everything. It was pretty much free. So had it shipped. Day later, it's almost like they still already had it in the warehouse. Funny story, I got a little dubious because when it arrived in a very small, compact packaging, like the size of a t-shirt. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, 12 panels in this measly little thing? Like, this does not seem right. I was already getting the Amazon app open so that I can type up the complaint and be like, what the hell, guys? What gives? And so I received it. I open it up, and I'm still a little dubious. I'm still looking at it, kind of going like, okay, this is a little weird. And then I start to rip away the little translucent plastic, and I see the little brain tissue kind of looking creases that make me go, okay, yeah. On second thought, maybe all 12 are in here because this fucker was shrink wrapped. This thing was completely the life, let alone the air, was sucked out of this thing. So then I got back. I was like, okay, let me make sure this thing doesn't just go boom. I made an incision, and sure enough, by that little incision, it started expanding, tore it away. Thankfully, it didn't like pop all over the place, but pretty much all 12 were in there. It was nuts. And sure enough, after like a couple of hours, they extended to their full size, and I was able to get all 12 out of there, and that was pretty cool. So using some double-sided tape, I pretty much put up all 12. They don't cover all the areas that I want covered, so thought to myself, should I order another set? And this time, don't use the gift card. Go ahead and pay the $16. Because it's pretty much like I'm getting two for the price of one. But also because I want to use the rest of that gift card for possibly something else, whether it be a game that I might have to pull the trigger on, Gotham Knights, or just something else that might come in handy later for either content or just because there's a game that I want to play. I don't know. We'll see. But so I thought to myself, let me order another set. Found another set that is not 16, it's 22, so it's $6 more, but I think it's worth it because this set is exactly the same as far as dimensions across. It's a square foot, so a foot by a foot, but it's twice the thickness. It's these that I ordered were an inch that I have set up right now amongst my door and a couple areas of the two walls that are more prone to having sound coming from the outside. Because here's the thing, my room, for the most part, like I said, treated because of the media racks, the collector's edition boxes, all the boxes that I have around here. The areas that I think are more prone to having sound coming in and out is that pretty much where my door is, because that's where the door is right next to the garage door and people are coming in and out right there. So I figured, okay, let me put up 6 on the door, 2 and then pretty much on both sides of the door there's 2 on one side and then 4 on the other. Oh my goodness, I just actually noticed one of them fell. I guess the double-sided tape wasn't all that strong. I'm probably gonna have to reinforce that. But and I did see some other people say that you could either use the double-sided tape or you can use those little adhesives. Can't remember what the brand is, but basically one of those that have like little clips on them. And then I saw another video of someone saying use needles. Pretty much just poke a needle, one of those like tailor needles, right through them. That way you make a small little hole inside of the wall, but then you just pierce through the foam. It's the least damaging thing you can do while holding up the thing because these are foam panels that they don't weigh that much. So I might have to do the needle route. I haven't made up my mind yet, but so far out of all the panels that I put up, there's only one that came off. And to be honest, in my defense, this one used the least amount of tape because I'm out. I'm already out of double-sided tape, so I'm gonna have to go and buy some more while I wait for the other 12 panels to come here. But these panels that I have up are only an inch thick. The other ones that I ordered, which should be here tomorrow, are going to be 2 inches thick, which means it's going to hopefully reinforce a little bit more of the dampening. So I'm going to pretty much finish covering the rest of the door. There's another little section in the top, I want to say the top right corner where I'm going to put 6 more, and then a couple more near the door where the garage door is at perpendicular to it. So this whole corner that I'm looking at, obviously you guys can't see it because it's audio podcast, but it's the corner where that's most prone to sound from the outside coming in, or me and my voice or my stuff, my sounds in here trailing off into, because there's no boxes dampening it. There's no acoustic treatment of any kind except for maybe the carpet, and that's where the garage door is, and people are coming in and out. Down the hallways, the bathroom, you have other areas here, and people just fucking around, doing things, parents, brother, all this stuff. So I'm like, yeah, this is the area that I need to focus on as far as all the paneling, and hopefully that'll help. But yeah, like I said, right now my main concern is trying to make sure that this double-sided tape works. If not, I'm probably gonna have to get those needles and use that method at least on these dry walls, basically. So that's pretty much the solution I'm trying to come up with here, in correspondence to what I mentioned in that last update video. There was a workaround that I was trying to think of, which was to do the podcast in the car, especially since I discovered, well, I don't really want to say discovered, but I pretty much experimented with connecting this microphone to my phone via USB-C cable, and it does work. But two issues that I'm like, you know what, that's just too much work, too much effort. I'm not going to even pay too much attention to it, is that even though the quality coming through is actually pretty good into the phone, it's recording in a mono track. So basically, there's only one. It's not like it's coming left or the right, but it's not doing the stereo sound. For those of you audiophiles that know what I'm talking about, basically, it's taking one dimension of the audio and just splitting it up in two so you can get it from the left and the right. But outside of that, sorry, I'm checking on my microphone here. Outside of that, it's kind of diluting the quality. You get what I'm saying? And it's funny because the app that I'm using to record the audio says it's recording in stereo, but when I then put it in even whether it be Audacity or Vegas Pro, it comes up as just one singular track being split amongst the left and right speakers. So I don't know what's causing that. I mean, I guess I could in post split it, but I don't want to do that. I want it to be natively recorded in stereo. The second caveat, and one could argue that maybe this is not so much where I'm recording the audio, but maybe just a personal thing that I need to take care of as far as my health, whether it be mental or emotional. But I tried recording it in the car. Whether it be outside of my house or a couple blocks away where I'm away from everybody and people aren't spying on me, aka my parents or my mom. But I tried doing the podcast in the car, and right now my AC is broken. My AC is broken, and it's just so warm out that honestly, within like 10 minutes of talking consistently, I started to get woozy. And kind of dizzy. My vertigo kicked in, and I was running out of breath. And I'm like, this is not conductive to a podcast. I can't continue on. I can't do this. I tried doing this last week, and this is what probed me into doing that 5-minute update from the car. That was right afterwards. That was recorded right after, obviously I took like a 20-minute break, But prior to that, I tried recording the entirety of the podcast in my car, and I just couldn't do it. Even with the window rolled down and it was all quiet around me, that's the one thing, is that the acoustics inside the car are really, really good. But because of the broken AC and because it's hot out naturally here up in the high desert of SoCal, it got to me. I don't know what it is. Like I said, it could be due in part with my mental or physical health, but after just talking for about 10-15 minutes, I ran out of breath and I just was not feeling good. Was not feeling good, and I couldn't finish the podcast. So that's also one of the other founding reasons as to why the podcast was also a little bit on the late side for this particular episode, and also because I was waiting for these panels to come through and set a few of them up so that I can hopefully treat the room a little bit better. And I can only hope that the treatment is going to become a little bit better as the episodes go on, as the content for the YouTube channel goes on, trying to come up with these workarounds, because if I keep trying to wait for specific moments where my parents are out or my brother is out or whatever, content is just not going to get done. And I will admit, a couple of videos, one specifically, I can't remember the user, unfortunately, the YouTuber, but he was pretty much giving advice for YouTubers. And one of the pieces of advice, which is funny because it's something that I tell my girlfriend when we're out and about, like grocery shopping, and she gets nervous that she's gonna feel embarrassed about doing something or showing affection or anything like that. I would always use this analogy or this kind of breakdown that everybody is a protagonist or the main character in their own story, and everyone else is supporting characters. So I'm a supporting character to her, to my girlfriend, or to one of my friends. They're supporting characters to me, being the protagonist of my own story. And I can't remember the exact psychological name he had for it. He mentioned this, like he read it from a book somewhere. But the YouTubers use this psychological breakdown to try to hammer home the point that if you're nervous or embarrassed about making YouTube videos and you're worried about what your family members, your parents, or etc. would think, just know that after having the little judgments, they're going to go back to just caring about themselves. It's just human nature. It's like, afterwards, they're going to be worried about the next thing that just caters to them, which is to make food or to go to work or to do this thing. You just keep doing what you're doing. And I heard that and I'm like, you know what? Sorry, excuse me, I'm choking. I heard that and I was like, yeah, you know what? Fuck them. Let me just go ahead and put up these panels just to at least better the quality of the podcast. And then just kind of press on. Worry about myself, worry about what's going on with me, worry about the podcast, getting it recorded, getting it up, but making sure that I don't lose out on that consistency. And that's pretty much what I'm doing here. And it feels good to be back, because now that I got that rant, that tangent out of the way, and that overall bulky intro, we got quite a few things to talk about, guys. I know we're almost damn near 20 minutes in here, but guys, there's a lot to talk about here. Like I said, now thankfully this week is actually starting off a little bit slow. Like there's nothing that really broke the Google Doc or broke more into the Google Doc outside of the stuff that I already wanted to talk about, which is of course that crispy state of play, what I personally have been playing on my gaming backlog, as well as these PlayStation shows that are going to be coming to, I think, a combination of Amazon, Netflix, and I think Hulu. I'll have to look at the networks specifically, but it's an awful lot of gaming-centric stuff, and we're going to go ahead and jump into it now. But before we get to all the gaming stuff, let's talk about Star Wars. There's been a lot of Star Wars stuff happening, and I've been pretty much keeping up with a good chunk of it. So we obviously have the Obi-Wan show, and me and the girlfriend have been watching it. We're virtually about halfway through here, because the first 2 episodes were premiered on Friday, May 27th. I don't know why they punted it, because I remember the original release date being May 25th, and this was prior to the events that they were kind of worried they would, kind of like have a triggering effect on them, without getting into too much detail about the real world stuff. No, this was like announced a month or so ago. Like Ewan McGregor made a video saying, hey guys, we have to like delay Obi-Wan by like 2 days. And so, yeah, that was kind of weird. I don't know. My guess is that it was probably because of Star Wars Celebration. That's actually what kind of kicked off Star Wars Mania for the past couple of weeks, is that on the last week of May, we did have Star Wars Celebration. And this is actually one of the things that I was kind of waiting on a little bit. I mean, most of the podcast had already been recorded by then for that last episode, episode 3. Um, and since then, I did want to tackle some of the trailers as well as Obi-Wan overall. But me and the girlfriend, like I said, we were waiting on those first 2 episodes. We finally watched them, I think that Sunday night when she finally came back from a out-of-town trip. And so we saw those 2 episodes. Then this past Wednesday, we saw episode 3. Obviously, like I said, I couldn't record the podcast, couldn't really talk about it, but finally, here I am. So we're virtually halfway through Obi-Wan already, because this is meant to be a 6-episode show. So we're already halfway through. That is nuts to me. Like, that to me is a little nuts that we're already halfway through, and in about 3 weeks the show's going to be done. It's a limited series, so we're not expecting a season 2, and frankly I don't want there to be. Not to comment on the quality just yet, but just because it's Obi-Wan. Like, at this point we already know where it's going into. It's going into episode 4, New Hope. This is kind of like that cartilage to bring everything kind of to full circle and to kind of give closure to the events of episode 3, which is ultimately one of the big focuses of this Kenobi show, is Obi-Wan Kenobi himself coming to terms of his mistake, trying to train Anakin and letting him down to become Darth Vader. That was something that everybody was ecstatic for. That's one of the things that a lot of people would argue is one of the best things about the prequels, is Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan, because he nailed that role. He was made for that role. So to see him be cast back, to become executive producer, to have this thing be a reality is pretty much a dream come true for a lot of Star Wars fans. And I'm not going to go as far as that, but to say that I was excited is, again, to say that I wasn't excited would be lying. It really would be. So what's the verdict so far, 3 episodes in? I like Obi-Wan, but it's not the best Star Wars thing that I've been watching so far. I got with the recent Star Wars announcements coming out of Star Wars Celebration and whatnot, even some of the things that they kind of announced after the fact, I personally feel like I'm more stoked for getting, of course, Mandalorian Season 3 and Star Wars Visions Season 2 than what we've been getting from Obi-Wan so far. There's great things about Obi-Wan. Of course, one of them is Obi-Wan himself, Ewan McGregor. He nails it. Performance-wise, I'm feeling the hurt. I'm feeling the melancholy. He's nailing exactly what makes Obi-Wan such a compelling character, but at the same time, why it is that he's no longer the same hello there kind of character that he was in the prequels. Like, yeah, he has a couple of lines here and there at the beginning where he says, "I'm not the man I'm used to be," but in further episodes, he's kind of nailing exactly why it is that he's not that man that he used to be, and why he's so resentful about the mistakes that he made with Anakin, and why maybe he's finally on that tipping point, especially after the way this last episode ended, why he needs to finally kind of suck it up and become the more mentory Obi-Wan or Ben Kenobi that we have at the beginning of episode 4. The one that goes, "Oh!" That's always been one of my favorite moments out of episode 4 that to this day, like, yeah, Star Wars revolutionary and everything, but that always never really made sense to me, is Obi-Wan coming out of the canyon being like, "Oh!" Me and the girlfriend make fun of it all the time, especially girlfriend reviews after her tackling the Star Wars movies, the original trilogy, and making fun of that moment as well. I was like, yeah, I get it. So, he's definitely one of the compelling things about it. And, of course, we also have the appearance of the Inquisitors here in the Obi-Wan show, specifically Reva, who's kind of got like her own little agenda going on. And, of course, her inclusion, or rather her casting, has kind of proved a little bit of a controversial angle with the show, especially with people that claim to be fans and are obviously doing the complete opposite of what a Star Wars fan should be doing. It's funny because I do have problems with her, but none of them have anything to do with the actors. It's funny because the actress looked familiar, and I even saw her name, and I'm like, where the hell have I seen that name? Because it looks so awfully familiar. And finally, once upon checking IMDb once, there it was, Queen's Gambit. And she is great in Queen's Gambit. Without going into spoilers, she disappears from that show for a little bit, and then she comes back towards the end. And when she came back, I actually kind of smiled and went, "Yo, she's back! If you were able to do that with me as an actor, you did a good job." So I know that she's a great actress. There's just something about her writing that's getting a little one note. That if they don't, people are having their theories, especially with a particular scene at the very beginning of episode one of the show, not episode one, the Phantom Menace, but of the show. That makes an awful lot of sense. Even me and the girlfriend were going back and forth, like, yeah, that sounds about right. And we wouldn't be surprised if they pull that as their Act 2 to Act 3 turning point, their twist for episode 4 here as we're about to enter this new week. And so, we all have kind of our theories as to where she's coming from, but right now she's coming off as just a little one-dimensional as far as the writing. Like I said, I don't know, like seeing this specific Inquisitor, this third sister, Riva, and then seeing the second sister, I almost caught myself there because I feel like I was about to say a name, and then I thought to myself, I probably shouldn't mention that name because I feel like that name is a spoiler. But for those of you who have not played Jedi Fallen Order, the Inquisitors make further appearances in that game, specifically the second sister. And it's the second sister in Jedi Fallen Order. It's the third sister here in Obi-Wan. And let's just say that I got more out of that second sister in Jedi Fallen Order than I did Riva. But beyond that, is it just me, or are all these Inquisitors just kind of coming off as just these routine bad guys that speak in the same demeanor as I am the bad guy? Bring me that guy, or else you will not live to regret it. Am I understood? You get what I'm saying? Like, it's that thing over and over. I have yet to see a villain that goes against type, that goes against, like, I don't know. Like, these Inquisitors, they're going to have to do something with them stat. And I'm not just talking about to Obi-Wan, to the show Obi-Wan. I'm also talking about Jedi Fallen Order. And I'm actually going to tackle a little bit of Jedi Fallen Order here in a bit when we're, involving Star Wars news. But yeah, overall, I guess we could use that as a segue to the stuff that I'm feeling a little conflicted by with Obi-Wan, because what makes it one of the, not necessarily one of the more impressive things of Star Wars related content that we're getting right now thus far, because a couple of things. One, the stagecraft, I think it's called, the non-green screen, the technology they're using with the panels and all that stuff. It was cool in season 1 of Mandalorian. Now it's starting to look obvious, especially whenever they keep using these really blurry and distorted lenses. I don't. It's probably just a me thing because I obviously sometimes watch certain things with filmmaker eyes, but it's starting to be a little obvious to me. Where I'm like, yeah, this is that stagecraft stuff, and that's probably why another particular show that I'm about to talk about looks so impressive, because they're not using that. Whereas here with Obi-Wan, it is starting to get to that point where it's starting to look a little samey with The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett and all these other Star Wars shows. And then beyond that, some writing and directing choices. Like, I know that Deborah Chow is a capable director. I've seen her direct a handful of other stuff where I was like, yo, that was actually pretty cool. And that's mostly what she's known by. But there's some, like I said, overall mixed bag, questionable things so far in the 3 episodes. One is, of course, Leia. The one that everyone's talking about on Twitter, as far as whether they like it or dislike it or hate it, is the inclusion of Leia. This could be considered a spoiler, but we see Leia here as a kid. I mean, you can kind of see Luke a little bit in the trailer, but a surprising amount of young Leia here, which at first glance, I thought was kind of neat. I was like, okay, we're shedding Leia as a kid. It's always been about Luke, showing favoritism to Luke because he's the one with the Force, he's the Jedi. But it's cool to see that Leia Organa is getting, I thought that was actually a bold and cool choice to have the inclusion of a young Leia here tied into the plot. What I then went back on and said, that's not cool, is how slowly but surely they're using Leia to then fill in the template. The template that worked oh so well for The Mandalorian, that worked so well for all these other little properties where you have a character, look after this younger character. Mandalorian with Grogu, Hawkeye with Kate Bishop. What else did we have recently? I don't know, but just take your pick. We've had a lot of these Disney Plus shows, sometimes a couple of movies here and there, but for the most part, shows where they're like, hey, let's take this gruff character that wants to be isolated and alone and pair him up with a kid. And then the kid is, smarty and all this stuff. And here's the thing, the stuff that people had a problem with the way Leia talked for an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old or whatever. I did not, because this was Leia's background. She grew up in a much more aristocratic ambiance, atmosphere. It makes sense for her. That's why I was liking her. I was liking her full force until two things happened. One, she started running, because not only I hate it when kids answer to everything is just to run away, period. That's just my personal biases against kids. But also because it gave us those terrible chase scenes that, thankfully, I wasn't the only one. A bunch of people on Twitter criticized that, and rightfully so, because it's just, it's objectively, like, we're not even talking subjectively here, objectively, technically, did not look good on camera. There's one shot in particular, a lot of people mentioned the forest scene, but later on when Kenobi's on that planet, that, scoundrel planet, whatever, that's in the nighttime, there's a bird's eye view shot that shows Leia kind of run across the screen and Obi-Wan goes after her, and you can literally see Ewan slow himself down to make it seem like he couldn't catch her, even though she's literally at arm's length. And if he had just gone a little forward, he could have easily just swiped her up. But he personally holds himself back. If you look a little closer, I was like, God damn, I winced. My girlfriend couldn't see me because she was looking at the screen and she was in front of me. But I winced. I was like, what the hell was that? So yeah, that was the first thing that happened. And like I said, that's the more technical stuff. On the writing side, when she started running and she got abducted, that then gave credence to that template that I was talking about, pairing up the gruff character with that smaller child character, and thus forming the template that's becoming a little bit too reliant for Disney to be on. And so far, at first I thought that maybe with episode 3, we were deviating away from that, because they introduce a certain someone that most of us know is going to be in this show, but I'm going to go ahead and just not talk about it too obviously here, but a very iconic character finally makes his grand entrance here in episode 3. He was touched on at the end of episode 2, but in episode 3, there he is. And I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, it's 6 episodes, so I guess we're not wasting any time. But then we get to the ending of said episode 3, and I went from, holy shit, they're doing it, to then go, oh shit, they're doing it? For two completely different things. So I said the same thing, but with two different contexts towards two different things. One was the actual verbal interaction, the face-to-face between these two, that I was like, oh shit, we're doing it. We're finally tackling the bigger issue here. But then the second one was more of a physical confrontation. One that I thought we were going to wait until episode 6 to do, because I thought we were going to, kind of build it up. And it was kind of lackluster. I was like, damn, are we doing it this way? Like, what's going on? Are we under constraints, whether it be time constraints or budget constraints? Because I don't know. I left the end of that third episode kind of wanting, kind of going like, is it just me, or that needed to be better fleshed out, and instead it just kind of got wrapped up? And I feel like with the two characters involved in this altercation, more shit would have gone down. And instead it didn't, because you either had to go all the way or none at all with that physical altercation. Otherwise, don't give us, and thankfully it sounds like I'm not the only one. I watched Jeremy Johns' review on episode 3, and he virtually said the exact same thing, where it's like, an analogy he used is like, there's a problem when a fan-made duel between these two characters that was posted online using computer-generated imagery did it a lot better than what we got here at the end of episode 3. And I completely agree. I was like, you either have to go full force here, especially with the context of this taking place 10 years after episode 3, but still another 20 before, or 9 or something like that before episode 4. It's like, that should have just been more. There should have been more there, or none at all. Like, you should have stopped at the face-to-face instead of saying, oh, well, here are the lightsabers. And I'm like, no. Keep the lightsabers sheathed. Keep them sheathed until episode 6. Don't blow your load too early, but I feel like they kind of blew it a little early here in episode 3. And then the budget started to catch up with them. They're like, well, we got to end. Goodbye. Separate them again. Back to your corners. I'm like, like the writing again, the faultiness of the writing came back to bite them. And I honestly feel like it really does boil down to the writing, especially when these episodes are ending. And in the credits, I see that like 4 writers are writing just one episode or the series. And a couple of them are using the word and the symbol and. And for those of you who don't know, when you use the symbol and, then that means that those 2 people actually worked with each other in the same room to write that thing, whether it be the show or a movie. But when they use the word and I might be getting this wrong. It's one or the other. It's a 50-50 chance I'm getting this right. But when you're using the word and, that means that someone wrote the script and then passed it off to that second person to then give it a rewrite. They both didn't communicate, and often they both don't communicate. Sometimes they pass notes, but they sometimes don't end up communicating. They don't talk to each other. They just pass it off, or the studio takes it from one person and gives it to the other and says, hey, rewrite this. And sometimes without context and without notes. And I feel like that's kind of happening here with the Obi-Wan show. Like, look at the credits. You'll notice that there's like 4 writers on that. And I fear that some of the issues I'm having with the writing are becoming very clear, that I'm kind of worried for this last half. So far, current impressions of Obi-Wan is that, it's 6 episodes. I'm obviously going to finish it. It's Star Wars. There's some really great things about it. Great cinematography, great performances. But there's also some issues with the writing that are not even problems with like the Star Wars lore, because there are, but even fundamentally just writing problems as a whole as a show that I look at and I go, why would you do this? You know what I'm saying? And so right now, not exactly my favorite Star Wars thing out there, but it's still worth a watch, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. Now, that wasn't the only Star Wars stuff that I wanted to talk about, though. During the coverage of the Obi-Wan show, I did mention that stagecraft was used in Obi-Wan. It was starting to kind of look a little too, I don't want to say samey, but it just started to show up to me. Like, it started to become apparent to me. And that's because we have also a show that's going to be foregoing the stagecraft, and that's probably why in its teaser trailer it's looking a little crispy. And that is Andor. We got a teaser trailer for Star Wars Andor, which is a spin-off series focused on Cassian Andor, Diego Luna's character from Rogue One. And admittingly, I am a little nervous that we're starting to get just a little bit on the agitated side with content on Disney Plus, because this is also coming out in August 31st, and this is the same month that we're getting. Let's see, it was the Andor show, Star Wars Andor. We got She-Hulk, and then earlier in the month we also got I Am Groot. That was recently announced, the animated shorts series for Groot, I believe. I don't know, something like that. But basically, we're just getting an awful lot of content. What does separate Andor, however, was not only the choice of not using the stagecraft technology, so therefore it was all shot on proper locations, and therefore it's actually looking rightfully grimy. I mean, that's not to say that Obi-Wan or Mandalorian or even Book of Boba Fett didn't have their fair share of moments and shots where it looked like it was, trashy and whatever, but this closely resembles the movie or the source material that it's coming from, which is in this case Rogue One. It actually looks like it's getting boots on the ground, and one of the things that helps that is that they're not using stagecraft, and I can kind of see it. It's a little subtle, but I can see that it's being shot on location. Outside of those technical aspects, does the show look good? It actually kind of does. When it started off, I thought to myself, I don't know, like it, you have the rebels kind of like hide the weapons, and I'm like, I feel like we've seen this already. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like I've just saw this, not even in just Star Wars, but just shows in general, or like recent MCU stuff, recent just all around content that I'm just like, it's blending in. But as the trailer went on, it did a good job of being a teaser trailer. It's a little under 2 minutes, so it's not a full-blown trailer, it's a teaser. And it just cuts to shots with the narration and the music kind of like swelling up with shots of Diego Luna in there as well. But the tone that it's delivering, it kind of resembles espionage stuff, political thriller stuff. Like, there's a couple of shots here and there with like some of the aristocratic people that look like they're doing dealings in the back and things like that I'm like, yo, can we, and I'll be open for this, are we getting like a House of Cards equivalent in the Star Wars universe? That I would actually be kind of down for that, as well as, like I said, any other political thriller type of stuff that you want. And as far as I can tell, one of the reasons why it looks the way that it does is because we do have someone that's attached to this that was attached to Rogue One, but also was, kind of responsible for dealing with this genre before in their films. And that is Tony Gilroy. And I needed to double check on the facts because he has a brother, Dan Gilroy. And Dan Gilroy wrote, I think he co-wrote or fully wrote and directed Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal. And I knew that I didn't want to get the two confused because Tony Gilroy also pretty much is a writer-director. He co-wrote the original Rogue One. So there's already a bit of a pedigree there with Andor and Andor's involvement and, of course, him becoming the showrunner. But also there's some legitimate quality behind the writing. There's some intention there. And also going back to what I mentioned about whole political thriller kind of espionage, Cloak and Dagger kind of stuff, he did write and direct a movie that went big at the Oscars, but also put a lot of people on the map. And at the same time, it's a movie that I really like. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but it's a movie that I like to study as far as like writing and directing and getting good performances out. And there's just something cyclical about it, and it's a movie called Michael Clayton. You may have heard of it. Michael Clayton starring George Clooney, Tom Wilkinson, Tilda Swinton. Tilda Swinton actually won Best Supporting Actress at the Oscars, and it got nominated for plenty of others, including Best Picture and Best Director for Tony Gilroy. So, he's got it down. So that's why there's all these different angles, specifically on the espionage, thriller type stuff, political thriller, that I'm like, okay, we can get something on the same playing field as Michael Clayton or House of Cards, but in the Star Wars universe, involving Cassian Andor from Rogue One, who was one of the more compelling characters out of that movie, that is also one of the movies that everybody agrees is actually, as far as like the most modern, you can kind of say Disney-fied stuff it has been, and everybody likes. I'm like, you know what? Sign me up. I know we're on the verge of getting a little oversaturated here with the Disney Plus stuff, and I'm not necessarily loving Obi-Wan right now as it is, but so far, I would say that the initial impressions from that Andor trailer are pretty good. And we also got another trailer that I wanted to touch on real quick, which is for Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which was the announced sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, something that I kind of referenced during my Obi-Wan take. And the reason why that is because we got a trailer. It's also another teaser that was only like a minute and some seconds, with some narration from what appears to be one of the Grand Inquisitors, if not someone is from the extended, not extended stuff. I think he showed up in one of the prequels, but I can't remember his name. But I saw his face and I'm like, it's either, I'm going to probably get it wrong and say that it's this character, but it's probably just a species of this character. I don't know, but he looks familiar, and he's talking about Cal Kestis. And Cal Kestis looks like he finds someone in also one of those hyperbolic, healing chamber tube vat things, and who that is, I honestly have no idea, but something tells me that he's going to be somehow connected to Cal's job to seek out other Jedi and try to rebuild the Order, as he's trying to do with his friends from the ship from Jedi Fallen Order. From what I remember, get the game leaving us off with. I'm trying to stay as vague as possible in case anybody who's listening to this has not played Jedi Fallen Order. If you have not, you could probably find it for cheap, $20 for PS4, Xbox One. And if you have a next-gen console by some chance, there's free next-gen upgrades out there that give it a performance boost, all that good stuff. So definitely check it out, and I recommend playing it because it's a great game, regardless of how you feel about the protagonist, because even I have to admit, Cal's not necessarily the best character. He's kind of blah. I have a friend who flat out hates him. I don't hate him, but I think he's a little on the bland side, and I am hoping, one of my pillars that needs to be struck here with the sequel. It's fine for the first game, but with a sequel, they can't repeat this, and that is to give Cal just a little bit more added dimension. He got a nice clean cut now, a haircut, but you gotta give him just a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? And that's ultimately what you got to do with a sequel. And it's coming next year, 2023. I'm assuming probably in the summertime, I'd imagine. Or no, I'm sorry. No, they said spring of 2023. And sounds about right because the first game came out in 2019. It's been 4 years. And when it comes to sequels, this could be considered a take. But technically speaking, and I really do mean technically, sequels shouldn't take as long as the first game because you already got a lot of the fundamentals already made as far as assets and mechanics and things like that. You just got to build and improve them. Ultimately with the sequel. So yeah, that's one of the things that I'm definitely hoping they pull for the sequel because so far I know it's just a CG trailer, so there's very little that we can go off of a CG trailer except for maybe breakdowns of the story and tone. And so far, I'm liking what they're doing with Jedi Survivor, as well as giving us the official title and a proper release window. Until then, though, next stop would be to get some gameplay. Probably not going to see that for some time, but I'm cautiously optimistic. And now to a quick what I've been playing, Salmon, not only because we still got quite an awful lot to talk about as far as the state of play and these PlayStation news and things like that, but also because I really only have one game, except it's the entirety of the game, because since I took last week off, I kept playing this game, and I beat it. I started and beat it since the last podcast that I had time to talk to you guys about Ghostwire Tokyo at that time. The game in question here, though, is going to be Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, another GameFly game that is already on its way back, which kind of reminds me I should probably go ahead and cancel that membership before they charge me again. But basically, Tiny Tina, if that name rings a bell, it should, because that's actually one of the crazier, more, I guess you could almost say iconic characters from the Borderlands series, specifically Borderlands 2, where she made her introduction. And basically what this game is a new Borderlands-style game, except it's not a direct sequel or even a spin-off. Some people have called it a spin-off. I like to call it more so a one-off. It's a one-off of what it would be like if you were playing inside. It's like a meta game almost. If you were hypothetically playing as a character in one of Tiny Tina's Bunkers and Badasses tabletop game that is pretty much a parody, at least in this world of the Borderlands world, a parody of Dungeons & Dragons. Bunkers and Badasses is pretty much the parody game inside of this game that's making fun of Dungeons & Dragons. You roll die, you have the Bunk Master, which is basically the Dungeon Master, narrating the game, the campaign, and all that stuff. And so you play as this customized character. You get to make your own character this time. And so, excuse me, you pretty much play with this character and with these two, along with Tina, 3 other characters. But along with Tina, you also have Valentine and Fred, who are playing along with you, a human and a robot. And it's pretty much, like I said, a hypothetical campaign of you going on this quest to defeat the Dragon Lord and save the realm, pretty much as general as it comes when it comes to one of these like Dungeons and Dragons style kind of campaign, making fun of it but also paying homage to it. And so God, this is gonna be a very interesting kind of review for the game because I am a fan of Borderlands. I've played almost every game except 3. Like literally it's just 3, the one that I'm missing. I have it. It's once again one of those backlog games that I have on the rack. I even have, I think, the deluxe edition. I think I got it on sale, but it comes with the steelbook and all that. And so I just have to play it. I just have to get around to doing it. It's probably going to be a while now since I tackled Tiny Tina's. And one of the concerns I had was that it was going to spoil Borderlands 3, but apparently there's no really real way of knowing this from playing this one directly, but apparently this is actually taking place between 2 and 3. So like the pre-sequel was a game that takes place between 1 and 2, this is also yet another pre-sequel that takes place between 2 and 3. So I found that kind of interesting. But thankfully, no spoilers for any of those games because you're literally just in a cave or whatever, and Tina's just the one playing this game, this make-believe game with these 2 other characters, and you as what they kept calling the newbie, which is you. And you get to, like I said, customize your name, how you look, how you even sound, your voice, etc. And you get to make him or her, or even they, you can even call it be a non-binary character and customize it how you will. And that is pretty cool. From that point on, though, it becomes clear that this is still more Borderlands. And so that's where the game pretty much becomes its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. because the greatest strength is, in fact, that is more Borderlands. That it is more of what makes the strength of the gameplay that strong within those other games. Like I said, I haven't played 3, but I played 2, I played pre-sequel. Hell, I even played the Telltale game, Tales from the Borderlands, and obviously I played 1. And I do really enjoy those games. I'm not like a hardcore fan. I'm not like a day one I need to buy that game. I mean, like I said, I haven't even touched 3 yet. But I really do, when I get around to them, I really do like playing these games. Like, I sink time into them. This game in particular takes about 15 hours just to do the main story, but I know for a fact I probably racked up 30 to 35 hours because I played the main story, and I played a good bulk of the side quests. I mean, I beat the story a little bit early on, and I still kept playing because I'm like, let me see what these side quests kind of do, because they're my favorite kind of side quests. They have narratives. They have characters. They actually have either a punchline or a payoff. And I emphasize on punchline because that's another thing that the Borderlands series is known for, which is the style of humor, the tongue-in-cheek, sometimes self-aware like this game is, or sometimes really morbid kind of sense of humor, in the sense that, people die and people laugh about it, like Tina. And so that's always been there from the get-go, and this game continues that on. But more to the point is that loop, that fundamental gameplay loop of shooting things in a very glorious fashion, looting them for better guns, crazy amount of guns, better gear, better, like a shield generator, or a better, in this game's case, spell, because in the other games you have abilities, but here it's more like spells, melee weapons that are modeled after swords and axes, but you still get guns, which is kind of weird, and there is some self-awareness about that. You have characters being kind of self-aware about, like, hey, why are there guns and grenades in this game? Because it's supposed to be Dungeons and Dragons style, and you have other characters kind of calling attention to that. But thankfully, like I said, it's a gameplay loop that is like 80% fun. It's 70 to 80% fun that I looked at and went, yes, I want to keep trying this out. And again, the humor is still there that the series is known for, with quite an awful lot of jokes that genuinely made me laugh my ass off. Like, it really, really did. Unfortunately, because it is more Borderlands, that's, like I said, where it also becomes its greatest weakness. Because it's been a decade, like literally a decade, since Borderlands 2 came out in 2012. Okay, which is when Tiny Tina herself was introduced. And even though moments made me laugh out loud, sometimes the humor did remind me that it's taken from that period, that 2012 period, and not all of it has aged the best, to the point where it is a different time, it is a different decade, a different generation, and the style of humor here, despite catching me off guard for the first 5 or so-ish hours and making me laugh, once you get to like hour 20, hour 30, it starts to wear a little thin, especially when you have some of the same jokes being repeated only by different characters, like that whole, it's okay, kind of whatever, like, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this one thing, don't pay attention, nothing to see here, kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that same vibe, that same wavelength of the delivery for the joke, that I'm like, okay, I feel like I've heard this joke 20 times, and it feels like it's also being butchered and mangled and killed when it's delivered by Tiny Tina herself, which to me is the biggest fucking problem with this game, and that's Tiny Tina. And she's kind of like a symbol for everything that is almost wrong with this game, really. And you could kind of tie that to my own personal biases towards kids, because I know I'm not exactly the biggest fan of kids as far as just their place in the world. But god damn, like, it just showed how much of a generational gap there is between Tina being in this game here in 2022 and then Tina showing up for a brief moment but still seminal moment in Borderlands 2. Because in Borderlands 2, one of the reasons why she worked was because, even though it's funny, because her personality is pretty much the same as it was in Borderlands 2, the difference though is that it's a different time, it's a different period. You go on Twitch. I'm gonna say it. You go on Twitch, you go into the just chatting category, browse for about 5 minutes, and you'll find someone, doesn't matter, any other, kind of qualities and details, but you can literally find just anyone in there, and they're probably going to have the same personality, the same energy that Tiny Tina has. In 2012, that kind of personality was not really found amongst an awful lot of social circles. You know what I'm saying? It was very hard to come by a friend or a person at a party or whatever with the same kind of energy and bombastic nature that Tiny Tina has. So when we came across her as gamers in Borderlands 2, she stood out. And they did the right thing of having her a limited amount of time. She was, I think, honestly, in the game for about 3 or 4 hours before she booted out past her main quest that was integral to the plot. And afterwards, she had a couple of side quests that you could do optionally. But in terms of her having a main quest that you needed to do, only took up about 2 or 3 hours out of that entire 20 to 30 hour campaign. And then she was gone. But she was memorable because of her placement in time, with that time period, with that generation, with that kind of atmosphere, and at the same time her limited amount of time. This made her it made her that supporting character that worked because she was a supporting character. Whereas here she's the campaign manager, I guess you could say, that she's narrating the entire game, and because of that she wears thin quickly. You know what I'm saying? Like, others were still making me laugh, but I was getting tired of her. Like, all, like I was like, just shut the fuck up. You don't have to say a little quip or whatever every time I gather a little die piece or a shrine piece or a poetry page. She literally says the exact same 5 lines of dialogue. And I'm like, just shut up. Can I turn her off? And nowhere in the options did it say that I could turn her off. Nowhere. Oh my God, she wore so thin, and it gets worse because it goes beyond the humor. As far as the writing is concerned, it goes beyond the humor. It's like, in another analogy that I can think of is, I remember some time ago that there were rumblings going around about Les Grossman, Tom Cruise's character from Tropic Thunder, getting his own movie. And I heard that and I rolled my eyes and I said, no, no, no. And that's coming from someone who loved his character in Tropic Thunder. But one of the reasons why he worked so well in that movie was because he's barely in it. He made his stamp as a character. He's in it for like 2 scenes. But he stood out because of that, because he came in what he needed to do and he came out. To make a full-blown movie, just imagine a full-blown movie where Les Grossman is the main character. I dreaded that, and thankfully it got scrapped. That's the best way that I can kind of, bring about how it is to have Tiny Tina be one of the main characters here in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. And I know it's in the title, gave her the benefit of the doubt. But finally, after playing the game, the finished result didn't fully pan out. Not only because, like I said, the humor wears thin, but also because as far as writing her as a character, they fumbled the ball hard, because the game at first made it seem, from a storytelling perspective, that they were going to give her an arc about touching on how times have changed, of how, like, hey, it's time to kind of grow up with that style of humor. And at first I thought, okay, we're being a little cathartic here, because this is coming on the 10-year, I guess you can kind of argue the 10-year anniversary of her being introduced in Borderlands 2. Only, and I guess you can call this a bit of a spoiler for Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, but it goes nowhere. The credits roll, and she's exactly the same bitchy brat as she was at the beginning of the game. You have other characters literally call her on her shit, but the whole joke is her going, no, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. And deflecting and being immature about it, and the other characters succumbing. And again, you can attribute this to my personal biases against kids, but I hate how characters like this, especially kid characters like this, get away with that shit all for a laugh. I hate it. I fucking hate it with a passion, and I hate it even more when kids get away with this shit in real life. So to see the credits roll and me resonating with the villain, the Dragon Lord here, way more than I did with her, because the Dragon Lord has a personal connection. I'm going to stay a little vague here to stay away from concrete, full-on spoilers. But let's just say that the main villain here, the Dragon Lord, who's exceptionally voiced by Will Arnett, And there's a all-star cast here. Ashley Birch comes back as Tiny Tina herself, and she doesn't skip a beat. She's still great as far as a voice actress is concerned. She's still awesome as far as delivering that level of quality that she did back in 2012. I mean, think about it. This is the same voice actress who plays Aloy. You know, in the same year, she plays Aloy with all that seriousness and how can I say it? Bravado. And yet she goes from that to playing Tiny Tina. It's insane. She's terrific. And then you got Andy Samberg and Wanda Sykes as Valentine and Fred, respectively. And I instantly recognized as Wanda Sykes. I'm like, there's no way that's not Wanda Sykes. And they're all four of them and Will Arnett are terrific in their roles. But you have the Dragon Lord who's saying some legitimate shit as far as calling Tiny Tina her bullshit, and she literally ignores him. She literally does not acknowledge a single bit of it. And it's like nothing. It's like nothing. And I'm like, okay, why put this in? You know, why give Dragon Lord these lines and this like arc of saying, oh, you know, she's ignoring me, without there being kind of like a payoff to make Tiny Tina kind of grow up, especially with one scene towards the end that I'm like, oh, maybe they're going to do it. They don't. And on that subject of that, you know, reaching the end and them not doing it, I also want to make the argument, playing devil's advocate here, that maybe they ran out of time, or maybe parent company over here, 2K, said, we don't have time, ship the game. Because they wanted the game to be out by the end of the fiscal year, which is traditionally at the end of March, which is when the game came out, March 25th. Because at the end, not only do we not get a very concrete payoff for Tiny Tina's quote-unquote arc here, but you also get the sense that there was more to the ending than meets the eye, but then the cutscene just kind of diluting it and just getting rid of it. Like, it kind of teases like you were going to get a choice in the matter, and then it doesn't. It's like, okay, I get the feeling that there's a deleted scene or deleted mechanic here, and you guys just didn't go through with it. It's a little blatant. It's a little kind of in your face, quite literally. And so, you know, playing devil's advocate, maybe they intended for a different ending or, you know, to kind of go, to give it that payoff, but someone at 2K said, nope, you don't have time to ship the game. And somewhere on the cutting room floor, maybe there is that payoff that I was craving. That payoff that would have made Tina a much more tolerable character. But at the end, I thought to myself, wow, Tiny Tina's Wonderland full-blown butchers the compelling and eccentric yet really charismatic character that we got in 2012. And it really doesn't help that a decade later, that style of humor, that style of personality can, like I said, be found so easily just by browsing the Just Chatting page on Twitch, that it didn't do her any favors. And now I full-blown do not want to see Tiny Tina in another game. And if they do make another Borderlands-related game, get rid of Tiny Tina. Get rid of her. All right, I'm done with her. If she shows up again, much like with Claptrap, who I hated from the very beginning when he was first introduced in the first game, no. Get rid of them. All right, either that or just retire the Borderlands property and move on. And I know that didn't pay off the first time when you guys tried to do, what was it, Bloodborne? I'm sorry, no, I'm not Bloodborne. Battleborn. Bloodborne, I'm sorry. No, that's the other one. No, Battleborn, which was supposed to be the Overwatch competitor from Gearbox. And that didn't exactly pan out at all. But maybe second time's the charm? I don't know. But if you guys are bringing back Borderlands, retire Tiny Tina. Otherwise, I'm not playing it. Because even though I did have, from a gameplay standpoint, fun with Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, Tiny Tina herself made me incredibly happy that I didn't pay any kind of money for this and rented it. It joins it with Ghostwire Tokyo and what was the other one? Kirby and the Forgotten Land as the trifecta of the games that I made the very conscious but very correct decision to rent through my free 1-month trial of GameFly and ultimately saving all that money. And I'm glad that I did that. So if you were looking forward to Tiny Tina, but you did enjoy the Borderlands games, I would say wait for a sale. Don't pay full price because Tina, again, this could be a subjective take, but they did no favors as far as the story is concerned. But if you are craving more Borderlands, then I definitely recommend Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. But for the rest of you, either wait for it to either go on a very hefty sale come Black Friday, because mark my words, this feels ripe for like a $20 or even $15 price tag come Black Friday. Or if you want me to do one better, I can definitely see this, especially because I don't think it even met demand, and probably not only did it not make sales demands, but also recently I hear that there was some controversy with some of the DLC that to kind of make up for that loss, they're either going to cut it in price or to bring players to like the core game and possibly pay for the DLC. It's either going to come to PS Plus or Game Pass, either by the end of this year or the beginnings of next year once it kind of fulfills that year-long turnaround time. And once it comes to those services, that's probably where it's better use of your time. Okay, time for some more positive experiences revolving around gaming. Let's talk about that state of play. Guys, it does look like, in a matter of speaking, the non-E3 time, as it's being kind of referred to by a lot of people now, it's kind of more or less upon us, because we're finally getting all the stuff that is either being brewed for the end of this year, like fall time, holiday time, because that's honestly when a lot of these companies are trying to release their games, or cooking up for the early and mid portions of 2023. And Sony, I feel, kind of kicked it off. I mean, we have an awful lot of scheduled events, some of which I will most definitely talk about on next week's podcast, because we have actually quite a few, between now and next week's episode. There's like 3 or 4. Most of them were pretty much the ones that were going to be bookending E3. The only 2 that are, I was going to say 2 was going to be PlayStation and Nintendo, but now I feel like Nintendo's the only real one that has yet to reveal anything. But you know how Nintendo is. Nintendo literally announces directs like the night before. They've done that in the past. So we'll see what they got cooking up. But between now and next week, we got several Game Fest. We have the Future Games Show. We have something called Tribeca Games Show, which shows an awful lot of indie stuff, PC Game Show, etc. And now we just and of course we have one of the bigger ones, which is going to be the Xbox Bethesda show on Sunday. For now, though, let's talk about what Sony was able to deliver, which was a State of Play. Now, here's the deal. It was called the Sony State of Play for June 3rd? Was it June 2nd or June 3rd? No, it was June 2nd. Yeah, it was June 2nd, 2022. And because it was a State of Play and not a showcase, is what led to a lot of people, myself included, believe that it wasn't really going to be anything terribly special. Like, expectations were low across the board. And I'm not just speaking for myself. There was a handful of other people that would go on the record, whether it be on the streams, on videos, whatever, first impressions, predictions, that they didn't really have anything as far as like something to just like fully expect, something to actually look at and go, yes, this is going to show up, and this is, we got our bingo card set up and all that kind of stuff. There was nothing inherently like that, and I was right along with them. My expectations were significantly low that I'm like, I'm going to watch it, but I'm not going to stream it. I'm not going to react to it. I'm not going to do anything like that. I had such low expectations. I didn't even watch it on its own. I watched it through somebody else's stream. The Gamer2323, aka Jeremy, one of my favorite streamers, he did a live stream to it, which even he wasn't going to do. The only reason why he did it is because he was planning on streaming that day anyway, and he was going to play Elden Ring and talk to the community, watch one of the NBA games, etc. So he thought, okay, let me start up the stream a little earlier and cover the State of Play. Good thing that he did, and it's a good thing that I also tuned in as well, because that was one of the spiciest, best State of Plays possibly ever. Definitely in a long time, but quite frankly, ever. Like top 5. Ever since Sony created the concept of State of Play to rival Nintendo's direct style kind of presentation, I would say this is probably one of the finer examples of delivering a great State of Play and a great overall presentation. And that's considering that, again, it's not a showcase, it's a State of Play. State of Play, by that title, means they're going to show some indie stuff. It's going to be maybe 1 or 2 kind of cool things, but nothing that's going to be coming up here in the foreseeable future. Nothing that's like a gangbanger mic drop form of an announcement. And usually those kind of things are saved up for the showcases. It was on last year's showcase, or E3 time kind of PlayStation showcase, that was like an hour and a half. And it was during that showcase that they announced Marvel's Spider-Man 2, Wolverine. They had a couple of other drops in there that got a lot of people going, and I think We had, God, what else was in there? I honestly cannot remember right now. I just remember distinctly Marvel Spider-Man 2 and Logan, and then a handful of other stuff. Gran Turismo 7 for racing enthusiasts, which I think didn't even pan out to begin with because of the controversy around that game. But anyways, with the state of play is just no one expected to start the way that it did with Resident Evil 4 Remake. Actually, before I even get into the big announcements, let me, of course, talk about the little stuff here and there that, of course, needed to make up this 30-minute showcase, which, it wasn't going to be like banger after banger. There were a couple of indie stuff in there that felt at home with the state of play. It's usually the stuff that you would expect out of a state of play. A couple of indies or a couple of things that have already come to other platforms but are now getting the PlayStation treatment. One of which is a game that I'm actually thinking about starting up here very, very soon, which is a game called Tunic. Is finally getting released from the shackles, quote unquote, of timed exclusivity over on Xbox via Game Pass, and it's now coming to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 later in September. Tunic, as well as a couple of other ones. Season, the game with the woman riding the bike and taking photos of things. A couple of like chill experiences here and there. There was a little moment in the middle that was showcasing PlayStation VR and VR2 content. Which is one of the things that they mentioned was going to be covered here in the state of play way ahead of time. You get what I'm saying? Like, they way ahead of time, they went on Twitter and such to talk about the PlayStation VR stuff and be like, hey, tune in on the state of play. And that was actually one of the things that they mentioned ahead of time on their Twitter and such, and on their feeds, on their social media feeds, that made me think that this wasn't going to be anything too crazy. They're like, oh, they're going to spend the bulk of it, like half of it, talking about VR. And overall, it was kind of just a trailer by trailer, beat by beat kind of thing that only took up about, 5, maybe 6 minutes tops, that show the Horizon VR game that looks to be kind of a neat experience. Resident Evil Village is coming to VR, so that's going to be a very enlightening experience that I know a lot of people, a lot of dudes specifically, but also women are gonna be loving, specifically for certain segments of the game that are, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's gonna be moments in that game that are gonna be replayed and are not gonna get progressed. They're gonna take full advantage of that VR content, of that VR functionality. Anyways, that's a new Walking Dead Saints and Sinners game, a sequel to that. No Man's Sky is getting the VR treatment, and that was pretty much the bulk of it. So that was pretty much all the stuff that was kind of in between. But let me talk about what I like to consider a full 5-course meal of a banging, a thick and spicy state of play that, like, when it was done, I was like, yeah, this is the kind of state of play. You finish watching, you lie back in the bed, pull the covers over, and you light up a cigarette or pour your favorite drink and just sip it after after dealing with all that stuff that you just got delivered onto you. And to me, you could argue, you can kind of interswap here what you the analogy that I'm going to use here is not indicative of the quality. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying that this is resembling of the quality that this game is. I'm just saying it in terms of like the way it was delivered to us is what it matches to me, or what it kind of made me think of a 5-course meal. So let's put it this way. The drink, because, when you go to a restaurant, you're always given like a really fine drink to, wet your whistle and to kind of get you in the mood for what's coming at you here in the form of your dinner. So to me, the drink, what would you like to drink? We have this decadent, very, the Spanish, European Spanish assortment of fine Spanish wines. And that wine is in the form of Resident Evil 4 Remake. Yeah, this is the one that just made us all go like, what the fuck, you're starting? It's funny because even they were kind of self-aware, like, yeah, a lot of people already saw the leaks, saw the reports of people saying that it's pretty much real. We just need to confirm it. The trailer literally starts off with the release date. They inverted, they swapped it. They pulled the reverse Uno card. And they pretty much said, here's the release date, but you don't know what it is, right? Well, let me play this Spanish music. And with the little R in there in the middle, I'm like, Oh, because if it wasn't for the Spanish music, I thought, okay, maybe Last of Us remake, because we saw a little bit of the forest instead of the R. But the Spanish music was the one that did it for me. The Spanish motif music is what made me go, oh fuck, this might be Resident Evil 4 remake. And as it formed the logo, I'm like, it's gotta be, it's gotta be. And yeah, big fat 4 right there, wasting no time. Footage captured on PS5, and it pretty much looks like a direct, retelling, like it's obviously a remake of 4, but it's definitely feels more in sync with the RE2 and RE3 remakes than it does with trying to go with like a different art style or anything like that. In fact, they even confirmed that the character model you're seeing in some of these snippets of cutscenes and gameplay, well, not really gameplay, it's kind of like, it's one of those trailers where they take they take the assets from the game and, like, whether it be the environments or the character models or weaponry or whatever, you're not really seeing like a slice of gameplay, but you're seeing assets that are probably going to be used in gameplay, and they use like a virtual alternate camera to move through these settings and these environments to then create your trailer here, your reveal trailer. You get what I'm saying? Like, they've done this in the past with some of the more recent Resident Evil games. I want to say ever since Biohazard, ever since 7, they've done trailers like this with Resident Evil. And so that's pretty much what you get. You get snippets of a lot of familiarized stuff, references, and things like that. And it's crazy because this is one of the first times that I can watch a Resident Evil trailer and go, yeah, I actually recognize an awful lot of stuff right off the bat. You see snippets of God, what was his name? Luis? Luis. The guy that helps you out. You hear his voice, or what I'm assuming is his voice, because it definitely sounds a little bit different, a little less. And that's the thing, is that they're going for a vibe that's more, again, going back to what I mentioned about them reusing the assets of Resident Evil 2 remake. It feels like they're also going for that tone of the Resident Evil 2 remake, where there's a couple of cheese, a couple of camp, but it's also trying to be a bit more horrific and a bit more like, shit's going down, get ready kind of motif, especially with the way that it shows Ashley being in danger. You hear her scream, you see this guy, going towards the camera and hacking away with like some kind of weapon. But then along the way, you see snippets of the Las Plagas, you see snippets, just quick glimpses of the castle, of a villager, of the first house that he enters right at the beginning of the game. Again, Luis kind of cocking a gun, of course, everybody's favorite red dressed woman, although it doesn't look like she's wearing a dress. It looks more like actually sensical attire to go into an Eastern Spanish village and take care of business. But you do see snippets of Ada and, of course, Leon throughout. There's actually one snippet, and I guess this could be kind of considered spoilers for the original Resident Evil 4 game. So if you haven't played Resident Evil 4, kind of sort of spoilers here, but you see a quick snippet of what looks to be Leon. Well, actually, 2 shots. One of Leon, kind of in a fetal position, if you will, in the boat in the middle of the lake when he has an episode, and then another shot where it looks like he is seizing up from the stuff that was injected into him, where he's kind of like crunching up his hands and he's like that. You see like his silhouette doing that. And then at the end you have the allusion to Salazar. You hear him, I'm sorry, not Salazar, Sadler. I get the names mixed up. But you hear him talk, again, similar to Luis. He's delivering similar lines from the original game, but not as campy, not as stereotypical Spanish. No, he sounds a little more ominous and down to earth. You know what I'm saying? Like our sacred body. Like, like it's striking that cool balance. And so leaves us with the title. And then we hear Leon, and we hear him say a line that I distinctly don't remember him saying, and it sounds like it's also the same voice actor from 2, the Resident Evil 2 remake. So again, going back to what I was saying about how it's kind of a little bit more real, less hokey, less, kind of camp, but still not taking itself way too seriously, striking a very delicate balance in there. And along with that, he says something that I could swear, I mean, I only played the game once, but I did technically sort of play it recently. Played it late last year when I was trying to go through my marathon of Resident Evil games leading up to Halloween when I was streaming. And I don't remember him saying a line where he says, "This time it'll be different," which has led people to speculate that they might be rewriting some things. There's definitely some lines of dialogue that for sure are not going to be in this remake. Because of the times, because of where we are as a culture, like there's some things that were said in the original that they definitely can't say now in regards to Ashley. Um, but it does also kind of looks like they're rewriting a little bit of the background history with Leon in pertaining to Ashley and the president. It kind of insinuates the trailer kind of makes it seem. I don't want to spend too much time on theories and things like that, but it kind of insinuates there at the end that things are going to be a little different, and I kind of hope so, because when it comes to these remakes, there's an awful lot of times where I think to myself, like, they need when it comes to remaking some of these games, don't do it beat for beat. Try to be innovative and think of different things that you can kind of come up with so you can deliver a brand new, fresh experience for those who have played this game to death. Especially with one like Resident Evil 4, where it's been ported onto almost every single thing out there imaginable. So you definitely have to come up with something innovative to give there to be a reasoning for why a Resident Evil 4 remake exists in the first place, especially when you have an awful lot of people saying that there shouldn't be one. If anything, you should have remade Code Veronica, and I'm like, I can definitely see that argument. I haven't even played the original Code Veronica, so that would have been a decent experience. But one thing I will tell you guys is that even though I'm in the minority that wasn't a huge fan of Resident Evil 4, and granted, I didn't play it. I don't have the nostalgic goggles like a lot of people do when they played it back in 2005. I technically played it for the first time last year. Okay? Last year. But you know what is currently sitting as my favorite Resident Evil game of all time? Resident Evil 2 Remake. And it's because of those mechanics. It's because of the polish, the presentation, and it's just, to me, one of the finer survival horror games of the modern contemporary time of gaming. So if they can take everything that really worked with the Resident Evil 2 remake and then apply it to the setting and the lore, I guess you could say, of Resident Evil 4, oh yes, I'm there day one. And the fact that we have a date and day and date, and year, I mean, sure, it's technically 2023, but March, just a few months. I'd say the hype is going to be real for this one, especially since we might have more to look into for Resident Evil 4 Remake next week when we get a Capcom showcase that might be breaking more details on that. So if they do in fact divulge that, I will most definitely be talking about it on the next episode. So if that was what was that? The drink? Yeah, that was the drink as far as our restaurant analogy is concerned. Then what would be the appetizer? It's for a game. The appetizer would be a game that a lot of people are very much looking forward to. I'm interested. I'm not like hyped, but it's cool to see that it's coming a little sooner than anticipated, and that is Stray, aka the kitty simulator. The game that just won everybody's hearts, where it was revealed, I want to say either last year or the year, probably even the year before that, with like all these robots. I will admit, this new trailer that showed a little bit more gameplay, a little bit more of the combat and puzzle mechanics, is it just me, or did it strike a much darker tone? You even had the music be a little, like, it had the same kind of instrumentals being worked into it, but at the same time it also had a darker ambient feel to it. And I remember, unless it's still in there in the game, it's just that this trailer showcased it a little bit differently, but I remember those first couple of trailers showed these streets, and you had these robots, these kindred spirits found in these robots that the kitty would interact with and things like that. You didn't really see too much of that going on right here in this new trailer. Nevertheless, though, the style that they were going for is still kind of found here, except just from, like I said, a different sort of perspective. But it was a quick trailer, and then at the end confirming that the game is coming July 19th. But that's not all. It's also coming at no extra cost to anybody who is a part of the extra or premium tiers for PlayStation Plus. So we're literally about a week away, just a little under a week away, of the new PlayStation Plus overhaul, where you got Essential, Extra, and Premium. Anybody who's got the basic PlayStation Plus right now, which is practically me, or I'm one of them, is going to get converted to the Essential tier, which is literally the exact same thing. It's the same price, you get the same perks, same everything. Extra would be $30 more, $90 a year instead of $60. And then premium would be $120 a year instead of the $60. But of course, with each added tier, you get added perks. To me, of course, the big one is the premium, which comes with the PS3 games that you get to stream, not download, but stream. But sandwiched in there in the extra tiers, the PS4 and PS5 games that you get access to and are able to download, as well as PS2 and PSP. And to me, I'm like, you know what? Out of everything, as much as I would love to play some PS3 games that I grew up with and have very nostalgic and fond memories of, extra, as far as value, extra to me looks more appealing. And now knowing that a game like Stray is coming day one, I'm looking at it going like, you know, I think this could work. I think the whole thing with extra could work to a certain extent. And so that's why I'm thinking about it. Like, I'm like, you know what? We'll see where I'm at financially by July 19th. So we still got a little over a month away. The new overhaul for PS Plus is next week, but Stray debuts next month in about a month or so. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, let's see where we're at financially. And maybe instead of buying the game separately, I'll probably just upgrade to the extra tier and see what gets thrown in along with Stray and test it out that way. So we got that, a confirmed date for a game that a lot of people were hyped for. I'm interested in, but we'll see what kind of unfolds as we maybe get some more dives into gameplay for that game. So that's our appetizer, right? We got our drink. I think most of us are now ready for our entree. And you could argue that this is probably a two-part entree. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a Gordon Ramsay restaurant, and you get the first part, but then you need the second part to kind of, you know, dress the entree, you know, to bring the flavor out. So it's a two-parter. And to me, the entree comes in the form of the 1-2 punch, you know, poetic, of the gameplay reveal for Street Fighter 6 and an in-game reveal along with the release date of the Callisto Protocol. Again, Street Fighter 6, I would probably say amongst all these games was one of the ones that I was like, I can see that being debuted here with full gameplay. I mean, it's a fighting game, but you know what I'm saying? So it's a little, I don't want to trivialize it, but I'm just saying, like, fighting games just by default have a bit of a lower lift than, say, an open world RPG. You get what I'm saying? Like, you know, there's less to do as far as, like, building a bigger development team to be like, oh, well, we have to have quest makers and we have to have design artists and stuff like that. There's a lot of positions that aren't as required for a fighting game than for an open world game. There's still the same amount of work, but just less people. So that's why I'm like, I think there's more to be brought here to the table for Street Fighter. And so they kind of did. It was a full-blown trailer that showed a little bit more of the art style, them going for the much more hip-hop approach with the graffiti and the hip-hop music, as well as also showcasing some legit fighting, some fighting gameplay between Chun-Li, Ryu, Luke, and Jaime. Is it Jaime or Jamie? Anyways, the guy that's drinking. But basically we get some gameplay. It does look a little heavier than your traditional Street Fighter, because when I think of Street Fighter, I think of something a little bit quicker. But the colors and the flashiness is still there, which I feel is a little bit of a 50-50 split with some people. Some people like it, some people don't. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm indifferent to it. I always attributed that to the style of Street Fighter that separates it from Tekken and definitely from Mortal Kombat. But I would probably say the closest competitors to Street Fighter would be something like Tekken and maybe Killer Instinct, but not really. You know, Tekken is the closest one that comes close, which is probably why that was one of the properties that I got a crossover with, was Street Fighter Cross Tekken. But yeah, I'll be lying if I said Street Fighter 6 didn't look kind of interesting, because it actually looked kind of spicy. And that's not even mentioning one of the little features that they kind of showcased there at the beginning that's got a lot of people's eyebrows, especially amongst the fighting game community, aka Maximilian Dude, who was obviously going crazy during his streams, where it looks like they're going for like a My Career kind of approach to the single player, where you have like a hub, not necessarily an open world, you know, Street Fighter goes open world, not to that extent, but kind of like a hub where you go to different things to then proceed the story, proceed your training, and then get into fights. So like when you finally have these interactions, it's gonna like cut to black or something. There's gonna be some kind of animation, and then it's gonna do the full on like side by side fighting. I'm looking forward to that. I would say, like in my career, that you get to customize your own fighter, customize how they look, customize how they fight. Prioritize where you want them to be, like quicker or heavier, flashier. Be able to come up with these different things, especially since then through their social media with like the Street Fighter Twitter and the YouTube channel and things like that. They've kind of teased. They haven't done like a full deep dive. They're probably gonna wait to do the Capcom event to be able to do something like that. But they've hinted that pairing is going to be coming back from one of the prior games. I haven't played every single Street Fighter game, but I know that there was pairing in there, so some people are kind of mixed on that, and they're interested to see if it's going to be polished and be better, or that could cause a bit of a crutch. We'll see. So, if you can customize your character to maybe take more advantage of pairing versus head-to-head fighting. And they're also bringing in this mechanic that apparently lets you taunt your opponent with facial animations during the versus screen before you actually get into the fight. I feel like that's just a way to. I'm gonna sound like a skeptic here, but to me, it sounds like a fancy way to try to distract us while the game loads. All right, that's so far that's how I take it. Unless I'm proven wrong via gameplay deep dive again that maybe Capcom's working on right now to show us during the showcase events that they got for next week, and maybe during that they'll show how heavy of an effect those little taunts could have. Maybe then there'll be something there. But for now, I just look at it as something kind of superficial. Nevertheless, though, there's an awful lot of stuff here in Street Fighter 6 reveal that I was like, yes, this is definitely. Gotta be honest, this probably should have been the initial reveal, but at least we got it a little sooner than anticipated. They didn't drag it on for too long. It still looks like we're getting like a springtime 2023 release date, maybe between like March or April, somewhere along those lines. So it's still a little bit of a ways off, but I would probably say that for a fighting game, that's perfect amount of time for the right amount of polish, and they wasted no time. They wasted no time in cleaning up that logo, especially after a lot of people called on their shit. Like, it's a good thing, and that logo. It's funny because it's kind of like a mixture of the old original logo that a lot of people were having problems with, but at the same time, it feels like something a bit more refined and original. And I'm like, all right, that's a much better logo. And if that's a sign that they're listening to the fans, listening to the fan base, and being like, hey, we want to make this a much more definitive Street Fighter game, then I'm definitely down for that. Callisto Protocol, another trailer that I was very genuinely surprised to see show up here on the State of Play. Much more surprised that it was not a CG trailer. I can tell from the get-go, I'm like, this looks in-game. And sure enough, it was captured in-game and on the PS5. I don't think it was like the fullest of gameplay deep dives. I think maybe we might be looking forward to something with Summer Game Fest or whatever here in the next couple of weeks to maybe showcase a little bit more of that. But there's a couple of moments where they did that thing where it's gameplay, but they changed some of the angles to just make it a little bit more cinematic for the sake of the trailer. But overall, if this is all in-game stuff, it's looking clean. It's looking clean for a survival horror game that, everybody was quick to call, the Dead Space remake. But I'm like, no, it's not Dead Space, even though it is from one of the creators, Glenn Schofield. It's like, yeah, this definitely feels like a lot of people are already labeling this as the proper Dead Space 3. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of looking like it, because a lot of people would make the argument that Dead Space 3 is when EA started to get in there and be like, hey, can you make this a bit more actiony so that we can sell these cosmetics? And I'm like, yeah, I definitely felt that. I played all three Dead Space games, and I definitely felt that with 3. I still enjoyed it, but there were, a lot of horror mechanics. If you play the first one and then play the third one back to back, you can instantly tell the difference. So to see a game like Callisto Protocol go back to those original roots, I'm like, yeah, that's looking pretty clean. And survival horror is not exactly a genre I gravitate to all too immediate, if that makes any sense. But as I just mentioned a little earlier, Resident Evil 2 Remake was one of my favorite games of 2019. If it wasn't for Mario Maker 2, I can't believe I just said that. Yeah, Mario Maker 2 was my game of the year because of just how much you can create and play with that, because of the replayability. But honestly, thinking about it, I think number 2, very, very close number 2, is in fact Resident Evil 2 Remake. Yeah, and sadly, no, I didn't play Sekiro. But that just comes to show that even if it's a genre that I'm not actively, one of my pillars of gaming, if you make a game good enough, just overall good enough, it doesn't matter the genre or if it speaks to me. I'll be sucked in. And Callisto Protocol looks like it has that potential to suck me in, just like those monsters are sucking in on Josh Duhamel, who plays the main character here. Because that's the thing, is like there's some some death animations there at the end that I'm like, yeah, this is looking visceral. And I, for one, personally cannot wait. And I'm genuinely surprised by it getting a December 2nd, 2022 release date. A little late in the game, but closing out 2022 with the Callisto Protocol seems like it's going to be worth the wait. And it's funny because it was up until recently that I remembered or realized that this game was revealed back in 2020, like summer 2020. So it's been a while. It's been a while to create what I'm assuming is going to be a much more linear experience. It doesn't have to be open world. They could just focus on what makes survival horror pivotal or great, which is the linear experience of being like, hey, this is supposed to be a heart-pounding, adrenaline-fueled rush of an experience. And if they're able to take all of that stuff that really worked for the original Dead Space and bring it in here into a brand new IP, I am down. It's already up on my list for anticipated games of 2022, and let's hope that it does not disappoint. That was our entree. All that's left is for dessert. Generally, I like to wait a little bit on my dessert so I can fully pack it into my tiny little stomach, but they were not going to waste any time before closing out the show with a Final Fantasy 16 trailer. Now, admittingly, not necessarily the biggest Final Fantasy guy, but some of the temple releases I do really like. Obviously, I played Final Fantasy 7 Remake last year, and I do plan to, I guess you could say, tackle a form of a marathon, hopefully in the next few months, because I technically do own the original version of Final Fantasy VII on Switch, as well as 10, 10-2, 9, 8, 12, 13 through Game Pass, 13-2 through Game Pass, 14, I actually do have. I can't remember what bundle it is, but it comes with one of the bundles that gets thrown in with a free month of the subscription before you have to start paying. And then, of course, 15. So I own quite a few of the Final Fantasy games, but I very seldom have played any of them. And, of course, prior to 7, I haven't played any of those, or nor do I own. Actually, I take that back. I technically do own Final Fantasy 3 for the DS, but trying to find the time to tackle any of these Final Fantasy games, because I know that once I load one up, it's going to be a chore. Well, not a chore. That sounds a little mean, but it is going to be a task. It's going to be a task because I know that these games are not meant to be short. They require an investment of time and patience. And as great as they may end up becoming, like, I'm a little, I'll admit, I'm a little disconnected from Final Fantasy. So I'm hoping that maybe 6 will bring me back. Granted, we're still got a while to wait because the end of the trailer confirms a summer 2023 release date window. But so far from what I'm seeing in this rapid-paced trailer, I have no clue what the fuck is going on with the story. But the animations look beautiful. The gameplay animations, as far as summoning, Ifrit and all these other summoning creatures, and the actual combat itself is very much Final Fantasy, but it's looking like a rush of an action RPG experience. One could maybe argue it looks a little, quote-unquote, samey to some of the prior Final Fantasy games that we've had. That's just not turn-based, so I guess you can kind of link it a little closer to 15 in that regard rather than the other ones, but it's looking a little bit more polished and a little bit more like, yeah, it's a Final Fantasy, but it's a much more mature Final Fantasy, but at the same time, not over at the top as much as the chaos that was Stranger of Paradise, which I've yet to play, and I'm hoping to play by year's end once we get a slightly deeper sale on that, because frankly I feel like I can wait on that one. But Final Fantasy 16, it's looking kind of clean. It's looking like a decent trailer. I just hope that, like I said, similar to other Final Fantasy entries and even adjacent Final Fantasy-esque things to come out of Square Enix, i.e. Kingdom Hearts, it doesn't lose me in the form of like story and character because of how it just feels like it's being made up as it goes along. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's one of my concerns. I'm not saying that that's what's happening now, but right now, none of the trailers have given me like a definitive character to look at and go, oh, I get it. I can see the story taking off from here. No. So right now, I'm being sold on the visuals and on the gameplay. So hopefully, as the months trek on to a summer 2023 release window, we'll get like a trailer or something that will full on tell us exactly what 16 is all about. Like I said, there's hints as far as like a kingdom and turmoil and stuff like that. But I mean, how many times have we heard that in prior games? You know what I'm saying? So let's hope that things, look a little bit better for 16 in my respect. But I know that people who are anticipating this game wholeheartedly are at the edge of their seats, and I'm happy for them. But nevertheless, it was a sweet little dessert to leave us off very, very satisfied with this overall state of play. My God, guys. Whew, I'm so glad that I finally got that out of my system. And here's to hoping that maybe later in the summer. I don't really expect it to be anytime soon, probably not even in July. I think at this point, it's probably going to take a while for them to deliver us a really meaty showcase, and that's probably we're gonna finally see a little bit more of Logan, a little bit more of Marvel Spider-Man 2. But one question that I did have when this state of play was over, where's God of War? Because they're all kind of insistful on that coming out this year. And if there was any game that I looked at and went, yeah, they might actually show a little bit more of this, was God of War Ragnarok. And to see it be omitted from the state of play, I saw some people post memes on Twitter with the sweating Jordan Peele meme, and I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see that, because I'm not going to lie, I'd be sweating if I was God of War Ragnarok with a jam-packed state of play like this, but for the game that is technically a AAA blockbuster like God of War Ragnarok that's supposed to come out at the end of this year, and it's not being shown again here in this state of play, not gonna lie, it makes me a little antsy. All right, so I got only one other piece of news I want to close out the episode. It's still technically Sony related, and it is a little bit on the older side, but I do have a couple of cents here that I'm like, really, why are we still doing this? But basically, a little while ago, Sony revealed that they are insistful, especially after the success of the Uncharted movie. Let's face it, it was the Uncharted fucking movie that pretty much opened the floodgates for Sony to pretty much adapt a good chunk of their properties into live action adaptions. Some of them are movies, some of them are shows, and they're going to be going to different kinds of studios. So I have an article here from the Video Game Chronicle, VGC for short. Sony confirms, let me just adjust the mic just slightly here so that I can look at the screen. Sony confirms God of War, Horizon, and Gran Turismo TV shows are in the works. First of all, when this got announced, I knew that one of the first memes I was going to start seeing online was Tom Holland playing everybody. It did crack me up, actually, I will admit. Let me go ahead and just skim a little here. During a business briefing on Thursday, and I believe this was not this recent Thursday, I want to say this was like a couple weeks back. This is from like May 26th, 2022, so it's been a while. It's been a couple of weeks since this unveilment. But basically, the article reads, during a business briefing on Thursday, Sony Pictures Entertainment confirmed that the company is currently working on TV adaptations of God of War, Horizon, and Gran Turismo, according to Japan-based analyst and investment advisor David Gibson. Amazon has secured the streaming rights to the God of War series, while Netflix has picked up Horizon. And this article now actually has an update. The update reads, it's been claimed that the Gran Turismo project is actually going to be a movie adaptation rather than a TV one. So it's going to be a movie, not a show. And that Sony is eyeing District 9 director Neil Blomkamp to helm the film to direct. Neil Blomkamp. You didn't give him Halo, but you're going to give him Cars, Gran Turismo? I don't understand. I don't understand. Now, this is another chunk of the article that pretty much has an original blurb from a little earlier in the year, I believe. So this is the original story. It says, Deadline first reported in March that Sony Pictures Television and PlayStation Productions were developing a live-action God of War TV series. It said the iconic action franchise was being adapted for TV by The Expanse creators, executive producers Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby. Yeah, Hawk Ostby. I read that right. Yeah, I was like, his first name is Hawk? What the hell? And the Wheel of Time executive producer, showrunner Rafe Judkins. It also claimed Amazon was in negotiations with Sony to secure the streaming rights to Prime Video. But obviously now it's looking like it is, in fact, going to be Amazon. So that was the original story. Now it says that basically God of War is going to go to Amazon. I believe I got a more serious. Yeah, Amazon secured the rights. God of War. Netflix is going to be Horizon. Gran Turismo is going to be a movie. I don't know if that's going to be directly just for streaming or if there's going to be some kind of theatrical release. The point is, the thing that, obviously saying these things, vocalizing these opinions is not going to stop Sony, especially. It basically, it's that syndrome. I don't know what the exact term it is for it, but it's the thing that Rockstar has said about GTA 5. It's the thing that Todd Howard has said about Skyrim, Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. If you don't want them to keep putting it out there, don't buy it. Unfortunately, a lot of people bought tickets to go see Uncharted. I surprisingly didn't, but mainly not out of spite, but just because I ran out of time around that time. I was like, I don't really care. I really didn't. Like around February, I can't remember what it was. There was even a point where I was like, I didn't mind to go see it, but I don't know what it is. There was just something in me that I just said I'd rather just focus on making my videos. And my girlfriend also was really busy because this was around Valentine's Day time, and her job really picks up for that time period. So this was back in February, and I don't know, I just didn't really feel the motivation to want to go out to the theater, but I didn't want it to like bomb or anything like that. I wasn't like protesting the movie or anything like that directly. But enough people did. Well, enough people bought tickets and went to go see the movie that it performed modestly. And because of that, Sony's now looking at these properties saying, what else can we, double dip in here in the form of a movie or TV show? Now, the ones that are getting shows, it makes sense for them to get shows. God of War and Horizon, because they're very narrative-driven properties. And also, that's not to say that this is also a very original pioneering thing. I think another thing that a lot of people over there at Sony are looking to is how people are getting kind of hyped, to an extent at least, for the Last of Us show from HBO. As well as, I don't know if it was supposed to even be a show or a movie, but there's going to be like a Division adaptation with Jake Gyllenhaal, I believe. So there's also that project kind of in the works. So all these different things they're looking at and being like, hey, there's enough buzz, there's enough talk about these things that let's go ahead and bring forth God of War, Horizon, and Gran Turismo. I guess that's the puzzling one. And on top of that, it's a movie. It's Gran Turismo. What can you make it? They're probably gonna. Oh my God, I can already see it in the tea leaves. They're gonna create an original character, some generic person. I don't know who. It doesn't matter. And they're going to be our main character through a movie that is going to follow the same beats and patterns as your traditional racing movie. Underdog, take your pick. Days of Thunder, Thunderball, I think is the other one. I might be, that might be a James Bond movie. I can't remember. No, but you know what I'm talking about. Like all these different kinds of racing movies. I would even say Rush by Ron Howard with Chris Hemsworth. Movies like that. And they're going to apply it with the Gran Turismo name. I'm calling it now. That's pretty much what the movie's going to be. To me, the more puzzling thing is getting Neil Blomkamp to direct. It's like two things. One, he wanted to do the Halo movie. He felt more comfortable with that, and they didn't give it to us. So he has, it almost starting to sound, unless he drops out, it's starting to sound like he's just picking up the scraps to be like, well, I need work. Because that was going to be my second point, is that I hate to say this. I really hate to say this. It hurts me. But it really is starting to look like Neil Blomkamp was kind of a one-hit wonder. We'll see, but he had a lot of chances to make really great follow-ups to a movie that I genuinely do love. I love District 9. I absolutely love that fucking movie. So when they were saying that he was going to be making a Halo movie, I was like, that's perfect. After seeing District 9, I was like, I can see it. I can vividly see it. That fell through. And so he decided to make other movies. And they were not great at all. In fact, I borderline super disliked Chappie. And I can't help but feel if it's either because the way it was handled or it's those two rappers that are trying to be likable characters and fail at it miserably. I don't know, but there's just so much about those movies. Elysium was okay, with Matt Damon. It was okay. It wasn't bad, but it was just all right. But Chappie and just a couple of other things that he has done, I was like, it's just so like, you can definitely tell like his heart is in science fiction. He loves science fiction, but so far, I don't know what it is, but District 9 is looking more and more like a one-hit wonder, and I'm just wondering to myself, like, is he going to be able to pull through? And a video game adaptation, I'm sorry, just does not read redemption for me. So I feel like if this was happening right after District 9, I probably would have given him a bit more of a benefit of the doubt. But right now, I'm just like, you know what, man? Just you do you. I don't know if it's going to debut in theaters or streaming only. I don't know. Uncharted was theaters only, so we'll see. But out of all these projects, that's definitely the one I'm looking forward to the least. I mean, if I could have my say, I would say don't adapt any of these because that's kind of the point as to what mediums they're in is video games, is to have an immersive experience, to then be brought to a much more passive experience that we don't have a agency on. It's like, well, then as a gamer, I understand the accessibility thing about like other people that aren't gamers are able to experience these stories, but at the same time you could also just watch the cutscenes on YouTube. I'm sorry, I know it sounds a little gatekeepy, but there's a workaround there instead of spending more money on something that's probably going to be potentially terrible. The only, like I said, devil's advocate argument here is that at least with God of War and Horizon, which have these really tempered stories that unfold over the course of time in a much more paced out way, are the ones that are actually going to get a show. And I'm like, all right, those need shows because there's a lot of content there. There's a lot of narrative material there that needs to be. That's one of the reasons why I was stoked to at least see that The Last of Us was going to be adapted into a show and not a movie, because I'm like, you guys can't just compact all of this in just 2 or 2.5 or even 3 hours for that matter. It needs to be a show. So to hear that God of War and Horizon are going to be shows, I'm like, well, that's the lesser of the evils, I guess, that they're getting something that at least allows the time for that story to unfold. That's at least one of the arguments on one hand. The other hand is called Halo, the show on Paramount. I've seen enough clips and scenes to know that I'm probably never going to watch that. And it's probably one of the worst examples to completely counter-argue all of the different kind of, slack that I was trying to give these two shows just now. So this is, I guess at the end here is that this is an interesting piece of news to kind of talk about amongst like friends and peers that have a common affinity for the PlayStation properties at hand here and love video games. But at the end, what can you really do? Because it ultimately boils down to being a old man yelling at clouds argument. It's like we can do this all day. We can have these discussions all day. We can protest on Twitter and say that they shouldn't be doing these shows and things like that. But that's not going to stop Sony. It's not going to stop Sony. They're still going to be trucking along. If there's money, they're going to pour it. And as a as a people who have an affinity for these properties, all we can really do is at least give it a chance. And if it's not for us, then it's not for us. Because believe it or not, there's probably somebody out there who loves that Halo show. May God be with them. And that's my last message to close out this 4th episode of the DarkspiderCast cast. I'm already tired. Thank you guys for listening in. Hopefully you guys will tune in next week when we're definitely going to be breaking down all these other gaming events as we enter non-E3 week a little bit much more formally. Sony kicked it off with their banging State of Play. But now we have, Summer Game Fest, Future Game Show, Tribeca, because they are going to be showing some Oxenfree 2 and Plague Tale Requiem material. Oh yes, I'm going to be watching that. And then of course on Sunday, the Xbox Bethesda showcase with 90 minutes of what they proclaim to be the best show of the entire event. We'll see. We'll see. You already have 2 of your titles delayed until next year. Let's see if you guys are finally ready to show some gameplay to actually make us wait that amount of time and be hyped. So we shall see. I'll give you guys my full details and breakdown next week. I'm definitely prepping the Google Doc ahead of time here. I will be filming a reaction to the Summer Games Fest, but that's only because they already told us in advance that they're going to be showcasing Gotham Knights, so that's obviously going to be material for the niche channel. But if they show anything else, maybe look out for the miscellaneous channel. Otherwise, though, definitely prioritize the niche channel and hit me up over on Twitter and on Instagram via the links in the description, or simply just search at @DarkspiderDavid. That's the handle, as well as the links for the website and the niche channel can be found in the description. And make sure to follow the podcast if you're listening on YouTube and you want to just have it embedded into your podcast platforms of choice, whether it be Spotify, Anchor.fm, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can also find that link in the description if you guys are coming over from that YouTube channel. Otherwise, guys, thank you for tuning in. Hope to talk to you guys next week. And as always, stay humble.